Ladies and gents, boys and girls, hello and welcome to another video analysis. And as I've reviewed the men's 8 of Tokyo 2021, I'm now going to review the ladies' 8, the women's 8 of the Olympic Games 2021. Interestingly, of the 7 women's 8 there were, it's unbelievable, there's only 7 women's 8s. But of the 7 women's 8s there were, the UK didn't make the A final. That must have been devastating. Generally, the Olympic Games for the UK and for the US, at least from a rowing perspective, were not exactly that successful. So who was in the game? Australia, all the way on the other side. Interesting fact about Australia. I'm not sure if I got the numbers right, but it seems like the Australian women's team for the Olympics Tokyo 21 got, I think, $2 million Australian dollars, and the entire men's team together got like a couple thousand Australian dollars. I don't know if I have the numbers still correct in my mind. Please, if not, please correct me. But essentially, the expectation was the men's rowing team is going to row over anything anyway because they're so strong. They need to support the women's team. Didn't work out on both ends, unfortunately. Canada in lane 2, New Zealand in lane 3. New Zealand actually doubled up. The women's pair that won gold, won silver in the women's 8. Incredible. And I wonder why, maybe put it in the comments, what are your thoughts? Why is it the case that we don't see this in men's rowing? USA in lane 4, Romania in lane 5. Oh, there's so much history to Romanian rowing, and I'm going to refer to this later on. And China in lane 6. China spends so much money in rowing right now, it's crazy. That is the first shot I want you to have a look at. Of all the 6 boats, if you just look at where they are respective to the lane markers, only 2 of them are actually centered. The US is fully centered and China is fully centered. All the other boats are not. Romania, oh, they're far off to their left, and they will have steering problems later on as well. New Zealand, you see, just came in a little turn here, and they're somewhat centered, but they're certainly not straight in their lane. Canada is going to win this later on. I'm spoiling right now, but you've all seen the results. Canada is pretty far to the right, to the port side. And if you look closely, you see this right there? They actually have a tandem rig. So they probably anticipated that the more powerful women were on the starboard side, the physically inferior women were on the port side, talking about Olympic winners. But nevertheless, this is a very smart way to compensate, and the way they start shows you that they have spent, I suppose, a lot of thoughts and a lot of work to try to elaborate how to make this boat go as evenly as possible. Watch how they have to steer. That is massive. that is a struggle for straightness. That is a struggle for straightness as well. So for coxswains, it's not easy at all. About 44 seconds into the race, there's the first speed comparison. Interestingly, it is already Canada with the fastest speed along with New Zealand. Gold and silver already are on par with the speed. However, Canada had the better start. What is also interesting, Romania had a start stroke rate of 50 to 52. If you look at the race data, they collect data every 50 meters. GPS is not that accurate, I found. Romania had the highest stroke rate of them all, the slowest speed after 40 seconds. Very interesting. All right, now we get a closer shot of the Canadians, and that is something that is awesome. Just watch the bow woman and number 2 woman row. The way they control their upper body and pivot late throughout the drive and have a pretty long, solid leg drive, to me, is outstanding. I love that. Look at that shoulder flexibility, that relaxation throughout the drive. How long she hangs in there. That is outstanding. I cannot watch this enough. So composed, so strong. Yeah, awesome. Really, really, really cool. That's the most scientific word I have for that. I'm just impressed. That long hang generates a long drive. And in too many 8s, I see this, that people use the upper body extremely early and cramp and tighten up because it's a fast boat, you have to catch quickly. But none of that nonsense happens here in the Canadian 8. I talked about the Romanians before and their steering issues. Now here's another one. Look how close they are to the lane markers. That is very close. I know an 8 is a wide boat. I get it. But that is pretty much off center. They must have had some either technique issues or power balance issues in that boat. And interestingly, if you look at the race data of the Romanian 8, their speed drops for 150 meter section. It's, if I'm not mistaken, it's around the 600 or 700 meter mark to 1.9 meters per second from 5 point something. Now this might have been a GPS error, or they might have caught a crab. The camera didn't show it. Maybe you have more information, you could put it in the comments below. Isn't that a joyful view? Look at that. I mean, the bow 4 of the Canadian 8, look at that posture here. If you had to draw a rower, say, hey buddy, this is what it should look like at the finish, that would be it. How the shoulders are, that tension in the ventral chain, that's essentially everything around your abs, that is awesome. That is so beautiful. She's a little more hunched over, same great tension. That is staggering. So cool. Pop. Their upper bodies are not super well together. It's not as synced up as it was with the male New Zealand crew.
A quarter of a boat length ahead. So much experience.
At the 500 meter mark, what's very interesting for me is how much space there is already between the boats. I mean, Romania is pretty far behind. The US is pretty far behind. We've got Australia and China on par, and we've got Canada in the lead. New Zealand is actually on par as well with Australia and China. Canada seems to have a much different racing strategy than New Zealand had on the men's side. The men's team from New Zealand built their speed over the race course. Canada tried to be in the lead right off the start. And that is, for me personally at least, my impression, one of the rare occasions where a boat is actually in the lead at the 250 and also wins the race. And I've checked the race data precisely. I've typed in everything into a spreadsheet, try to find out where did you actually make the speed. And to me, it is that Canada is pretty much always amongst the fastest, and there are 3, 4, 5 spots across the entire race where Canada is faster, and one of them is the start. Then it seemed to have a push at around 5, 6, 700, but everybody seems to have higher speed there. I'm not sure if this is where the bridge was, but GPS data seems to be off with all the boats right there. All right, now this is a good shot to talk about how the crews look and how to use their upper body weight. When I analyzed the man's 8, I focused a lot on when people use their upper body weight. When is the body swing? When do they pivot? And the reason why I do this is that I believe an effective rowing stroke and the way you influence the boat and the force curve you generate, which essentially is your handwriting of rowing technique, has a lot to do with how you use your upper body. It's all about using upper body weight or your body weight in general. But the one thing that you can actually use dynamically is the upper body. And the earlier you use that upper body weight, the earlier is the peak of your force, which means there's not much left when the oar is actually in perpendicular position, when it would be in a great position to accelerate the boat any further. So I personally believe that the later you pivot, or the more you pivot around perpendicular, this is where it can actually give the boat more speed than picking up early and creating an early peak force. And the reason why I think so is that the material we have today with essentially carbon, everything, carbon rigger, carbon boat, carbon oars, everything is carbon. There's a pretty much direct force transfer. There's not much kinetic energy stored in the equipment we use today. Now, a lot of the technique that we see today, and I personally believe that this is also the case with at least the Romanian stroke women and parts of the Romanian ladies, that technique originates from the 90s, 80s, and that from the 70s when we had very soft material. That material would actually favor rowers who could create an early force peak, store a lot of kinetic energy in that material, especially in the oars, and wait for the bend at the finish. This is why a late upper body swing wouldn't make a lot of sense. All you have to do is be patient there, hold the tension, and wait for the snap. Now, this effect became less and less as the material became stiffer. In the 90s, we finally got the big blades and carbon oars and all of that stuff. And the material we have now, almost 30 years later, it's from a different universe. Even today they have to call oars soft because they are so hard. But no matter how soft you call them, they're still hard. That's the reason why I think that your upper body work in a boat is heavily underestimated. It has so much effect on how your handwriting is, how you move a boat along. And if you don't move or send a boat along, you will not be as fast as a crew that may be physically inferior to your crew, but actually manages to use the energy in a combined way. This is why one of my major focus points, also when I work with people on the bi-rower, where you can see the four strokes live, is how do you use upper body weight? That's the one speed generator. And I keep on hammering on that issue in all the videos I do, because for me... Okay, we're back with proper audio recording, so please excuse the bad audio that you had to endure before. I sincerely apologize. I was just hammering on that point when you use the upper body and why. Now let's talk about the boats right here. None of the crews that I get to see are actually as well synced as I've seen it on the men's side, especially with that British Man's 8. On the women's side, it is much different here. That's at least my personal impression. Let's start with the Chinese 8. If we just look at number 1 and 2 seat, the way they row, you see this? The bow woman right here pivots right at the catch, very early. She almost seems to connect with an upper body pivot, so she seems to stabilize the trunk with an upper body motion. It's going to be very difficult for her to hold the upper body steadily, so to keep the upper body weight under control and pivot late throughout the drive. And as a matter of fact, she doesn't. She pivots right with the drive, which means she creates an influence on the boat where she has an early peak. So she tries to accelerate the boat early. Now, other people in that boat maybe don't. So she has to move more mass, needs more raw power. For her, it feels like she's going to pull that boat alone to a certain extent. And as a matter of fact, she does. If you pivot very early, you create an early peak force, and that means you overpower somebody who creates a late force peak or a stable plateau, which is the most effective drive in my humble. Number 2 lady, Chinese number 2 seed, she actually, see this? Her seat starts to move before the blade is actually in the water. You have to look very closely. Right there, where my cursor is, the blade is getting into the water. Now she's starting to move the seat. You could almost say it's perfectly synchronized, or maybe a bit off. Maybe it's a matter of perception. But to me, it looks like she does exactly the opposite of what number 1 seed does. But I might be mistaken. Now, if I compare number 2 and 3 seed, and the reason why I talk a lot about Chinese is because they will be third, and I know that they invest a lot to become successful. In the comments that I appreciate a lot, some of you say it's very difficult and maybe misleading to compare port and starboard side if you only have one view available. I agree, it is challenging, but there are certain things, again, I think you can compare. For example, if we look at number 3 seed, see how she uses the upper body pretty much in a contrary fashion to number 2 seed. You see this, how she opens, my microphone, she opens her upper torso just above her chest before she starts to drive. Let's go back a couple frames, forward, opens. See this here. It's a tiny bit. For the rest, I think she's got a super stable drive, a long drive and a late pivot. That is beautiful. But she doesn't pivot a lot. Interesting style. If we compare this to bow woman, she does pivot a lot more. No, she does pivot a bit more. Okay, always be precise. Let's look at number 4. If you just check the angles, there is a difference. And you may say, well, you can't complete 3 and 4. Well, then compare 2 and 4. That's a different angle. 4 and 5. She's 5 seat here. Wow. Oh, that is beautiful. Look at her. She does it super well. Starts to drive, holds the upper body in place. Oh, that is gorgeous. Wow. Massive. Oh, more pivot than number 3 seat actually. How beautiful. Go back, enjoy this once more. Starts to drive, holds. These are gems, ladies and gents. That is awesome. Wow, that is beautiful. Okay, let's look at 6th seat here. Let's go back a couple of frames. Seems to dig deep just before the catch to get the blades off the water. You see this? Close to the water, digs deep, reaches forward a lot. To me, it almost looks like going extra forward. Maybe deceiving, I don't know. Ooh, good Lord, that's a lot of upper body use very early. You can actually see the angles being different here. Also pretty round, low back. Let's look at 7th seat. Oh, look at that. The upper body seems to pivot, not right at the catch, but right after the catch. That's about the 3rd different timing I've seen in this boat. Leg drive, now the upper body engages. Yeah, it makes sense, just when most of the force runs through the body. And almost no upper body swing. Interesting. Let's look at the stroke woman. Wow. She must have been told, legs down, legs down. Wow. Wow, she brutalizes her back. Good Lord. You see this? Hammers down the legs. With a round back like this, I hope she doesn't get a back injury. Seriously, dude. I mean, it's super effective. It's not healthy, but it's super effective. Wow. She must, I mean, everybody in that boat is gotta have dedication to the point of craziness, but she's gotta be insanely dedicated. Wow, massive leg drive. And I think she's got a pretty long upper body for her height. I've never seen her, don't know her personally, but that to me, it looks like if the legs go down so massively quick, boom, down, upper body works, and just drive it in there. Wow. And see, in this entire motion, this Chinese boat looks a bit, there's a lot of upper body motion as they approach the catch. Look, 1, 2, 3, right there, and look stern pair. Just the way the heads move. That looks quick, but not synced at all. I wonder how this affects. Also, something very interesting about the US boat. Look at number 3 seat. That's so vastly different. It looks like number 3 seat hits the oar of number 2 seat every catch. I mean, of course that's not the case, but boy, does this look different. Let's stop this right here. She uses upper body a lot, very early. Wow, very early. Where number 2 seat has a nice hang. In slow motion, it's not frame by frame. It's not even that visible. Woo. Number 4 seat is using her upper body, but later as well. I think the American girls use their upper body quite a lot. It's a nice rowing style. That is so out of sync in number 3. But maybe because of anthropometics, number 3 seat has to move differently to create the same force curves. So I count on your comments. Is there any background knowledge you guys got? I'd be very curious to learn more. Now, let's look at the Romanians. I know the Romanians are not a medal container, but for me, a very interesting thing was Romania was so dominant in the 90s. They had a down phase for a couple of years. And within the last couple of years, they were able to build an entire squad of women's and men's rowers of exceptional quality. That was awesome. Just bringing 2 8s to the Olympics. That is fantastic. The Romanian 8, the men's 8 didn't make it into the A final. The women's 8 did. So I reckon most of them are still pretty young, but I've got very little background knowledge here. What's interesting is that their technique is still focusing a lot on stroke rate, stroke rate, stroke rate, and more stroke rate. Now, they can't hold up the stroke rate as much as they do here. There was a final in Lucerne, I think, where they hit a 52 at the finish. That is insane. And Romania had a 52 here at the start, the highest stroke rate of them all. And their technique seems to show that they don't use a lot of upper body. It's legs, a bit of swing, right into the finish, back to the next. And if you look at the stroke woman, she rows differently, probably in order to be able to keep the stroke rate up. It's legs right into the upper body. No lean back, shoulders are stay in the front. The bow woman does use the upper body quite a bit. That is quite a bit of a difference here. Also between 2 and 3. It's interesting. The closer you look, the more discrepancies you find. Look at the Canadian 8. I know it's far away. It's very far away. But I do have the impression that there are 2 4s rowing in there. One that pivots early and one that pivots later. Have a look. So the stern 4 seems to pivot exceptionally early, while the bow 4 seems to pivot more on the later side than on the earlier side. And the Australians are so far away, it's almost impossible to say anything about them, which is a pity. Yeah, now we get a better shot of the Canadians. Look at that. If you look between 4 and 5C right there, this is where I do have the impression that they move differently. We got the tandem rig here, the 2. So you can compare it because they actually do sit on the same side. That's both port side and the center. So number 5 uses our upper body pretty early while 4 doesn't. Does it create a different type of force curve? Probably. But there's something in force curves where you can actually help a different athlete to build a higher force curve if you peak earlier. So it's called supporting the force curve of a different athlete. So overall speaking, that can help to create a longer plateau, but the downside is that the person that peaks earlier runs out of motion, of upper body motion. So it's quite a challenge to get the timing right. Look at that between 4 and 5. I mean, I'm talking about the Olympic champion here. You could say, hey, they became Olympic champion. There's nothing to argue. I say, okay, good. There's nothing to argue. Well, then enjoy the results and stop watching. Or you can simply say, well, let's look at the best and look at the little details. What do we find? Are they all perfect? And we found out, no, they're actually not. Hey, cool. They've got their issues as well, and they're Olympic champions, or got a silver, bronze medal, or we're in the A final. That is something that interests me. Because then I know, look, if I work on that and that and that and that, I help my athletes to become more advanced, become better, become faster. Because I know, look, even the Olympic athletes have these issues, you know. I mean, I'm working with Olympic athletes too. I know they've got these issues. So at that stage, that's the 1250 meter mark. Canada has almost 11 meter lead over everybody else. Now, an 8 is 17 meters long, roundabout. And that means they've got about 2/3 of a length up. New Zealand already in second position, and Australia in third. The angle is a bit deceiving. Australia and China are almost neck and neck. Now this is where New Zealand makes a pretty massive push, I think. It's about the 1500 meter mark. What we see now is China's massive push for a clear third place. They actually try to get second. You can see even one of the Chinese girls looks out of the boat. You know, where are the Kiwis? Can we catch them? The camera doesn't really show it, but China is pushing extremely hard. This is where they passed Australia and they passed the States clearly. And the finish becomes actually a pretty tight one. So Canada is being pushed immensely here by New Zealand. New Zealand sees the Chinese coming strongly. Romania has a strong push for the finish. Impossible. I checked the stroke rates. It actually wasn't that absurdly high. It was in the mid-40s, low mid-40s, just like everybody else. You know what I find unbelievable? That the very same Kiwi pair that won gold sits in that 8 and makes silver. That is, for me, beyond belief. I know there have been cases like these in Olympic history, or in World Championship history at least. I mean, a lot of people can say, yeah, I was at the Olympics. That was awesome. Some people can say, I made the Olympic A final. Not a lot. Some people can say, I made an Olympic medal. Some people can say, I made Olympic gold. And some people can say, yeah, it was Olympics. I made 2 medals. Pardon me? Yeah, 2. Say it again. What? How many? In rowing? How many? Yeah, 2. Rowing is not a sport where you can usually make more than 1 medal. That is insane. So this is something where I draw my hat. It's spectacular. Yeah. So last 250 to go, and New Zealand is pushing hard, and China is pushing hard. You can see this. Wow. They're putting in all the power they've got. And at that stage, China is pushing New Zealand tremendously. Romania is pushing the US. So you can actually see that final push to the line. You can imagine how hard Canada's got to be going just to fight off the Kiwi charge and the Chinese charge. Australia and the US are going flat out, just like Romania. They're trying to catch up everything now. But that desperate push for the middle, oh boy, that is insanely impressive. You see, number 4 girl here, she actually does look out. Where is she? Now, where are they? Oh, back. I used to tell my athletes, never look out. Now I tell my athletes, if it triggers you, do it. I mean, seriously, I don't know how many 1,000 kilometers you row per year, how many times you look out. Why should you stop looking out right now? I know a lot of coaches say, never look out of the boat. We are not machines. We are emotional beings. And if you look at some of the Italian racing, they spend more time looking out of the boat than looking into the boat. And they still win. So what's the use? Yeah, that is pure power. That is so amazing. I wonder how many men's eights would actually have severe difficulties to keep up with these ladies. That is so fast and so strong. Yeah, Canada wins and is actually not as dominant as you'd think. To me, the most impressive thing is how New Zealand and Canada were dead far ahead of everybody else. There were a couple of impressive facts. The first one is the women's Kiwi pair doubled up and actually rowed in the 8 and made 2 medals. The Australian women's team, rowing team, was incomparably better funded than the men's team and missed out on the medal. You probably know my attitude towards that. It is not that easy to make a medal. It is quite hard even to make the A final. The British women's 8 didn't even make the A final, and there were only 7 8s. So that shows you that it's pretty fierce competition. It isn't that easy. And then you got Wonder Woman like in a Kiwi 8 or a Canadian 8. That's not an easy challenge. And you can imagine how much China has put into that project just to get a medal. And that's the interesting thing. I mean, you got large countries, big countries like China with a lot of funding, a lot of money. Not sure about their politics, but they have almost equal chances of making a medal. And I heard they train in military bases and all that stuff and all the things that come with it. I'm not going to go deeper into that topic right now. But then you got a small country like Romania turning up with 2 8s, a men's 8 and a women's 8, making the A final. They're not a challenge for the medal, but there's not much missing. So that is one of the insights for me, is that if you've got people who are dedicated enough, if you know how to synchronize force curves, if you know how to make people understand how beautiful rowing is and that it is worth spending almost all your wake time with it, even tiny countries can make it. One of the best examples for me is Slovenia. Slovenia is tiny. It is a small country, not a lot of people. And yet Slovenia has more medals in Olympic rowing than Austria, which has significantly more people. Another insight for me is that the women's 8s seem to be less synchronized than the men's 8s were. The British men's 8 we saw and the New Zealand men's 8 we saw were significantly more synchronized, in my humble opinion, than all of the women's 8s I've seen. In some of the women's boats, there are, in my humble opinion, major discrepancies in the way the upper bodies are used. Does it make an effect? I'm 100% sure. I don't want to start a discussion about is women's rowing as good as men's rowing, because I think that's silly and outdated. But I'm trying to be as objective as possible. And to me, there were more discrepancies. And as a last point to this video, I would like to ask you a favor. Maybe you can put it in the comments below. How many Olympic races are you aware of on the women's and on the men's side where people have doubled up in multiple races to win an Olympic medal? So I'm looking forward to your feedback. What do you think of this? What do you think of the rowing? Do you think that using the upper body early or later creates such a massive difference? And what are the background information? What is the background information that you've got? Thank you very much for watching. Thank you very much for sharing. If you haven't subscribed, please do so. Helps me out. I can spend more time with these videos. It's a subscriber count. The more subscribers I've got, the more time I'm going to spend on that. All right. I've got a couple of requests to do more videos. For example, the men's double scull of Tokyo. I've got one or two special video requests where people send their footage. So this is what I'm going to do next. And then I'm looking forward to your input and your ideas. All right. If you want to work with me, go to rmtraining.com. I work with quite a lot of people. If it's national team athletes, most of the time under the radar. So I'm not officially involved, but unofficially quite a bit. And if you're a competitive Masters athlete, you want to be at the Masters Worlds or at the Masters Nationals, you want to compete, be successful, have a long-term build-up, then I'm the right man. All right, go to rmtraining.com. Looking forward to meet you all. And I'm going to meet you in Bled at the Bled rowing camp. If you want to join, it's a 2-day rowing camp right between the Bled International Regatta and the Euromasters in Bled. And then there's a second camp of this season. It's going to be from August 2nd to August 5th in Budapest. It's a 4-day camp, and that's going to be pretty awesome as well. All right, go to rmtraining.com for more details. I'm looking forward to the discussion in the rowing.zone. This is the rowing enthusiasts community. And now I see you in the next video. All the best. Bye-bye.